Welcome everybody to this webinar. I just want to do a quick sound check. Maybe you can drop us a quick note in the chat if everybody can hear and see as well. There's a chat on the right hand side. We get at least one thumbs up, so that's lucky. Hi Lily, good morning, good to see you again.
Mario, Anne, and Rick.
Okay,
good morning.
Well, it seems that technology is working, so that is good. Welcome again to this webinar on becoming a best-in-class innovator. In the past 2 years, been sort of driven by COVID, we run 3 series of webinars covering a range of innovation topics, and we've decided to rerun some of them, a selection that is. Before this summer, we started with the one on disruption, and today we will continue with the one on how to become a best-in-class innovator. This will, however, not be an exact copy of the previous one, which was, I think, early 2020, because otherwise we could have said, well, just go to the website and on the on-demand page. But compared to 2020, we've included several new insights. I think we have much more data available now and also some interesting cases from our own practice. Just to introduce ourselves, my name is Marc Douma. I'm partner, co-founder at RevelX. Next to me, as always, Matthijs.
Good morning.
Good morning. Also a partner at RevelX. We will be your host of this webinar. And also, as always, we have our commercial chief, Rob, behind the controls. He's going to make sure everything is running smoothly. He'll pick up some of your questions in the chat, and we will do so, by the way, as we go along. Just briefly about RevelX, we're a boutique consultancy firm. We help our clients to realize growth through innovation. We work for large corporates as well as smaller scale-ups aiming to grow and to become a larger corporate. And we have quite a wide range of experience in different industries, different sectors, also working for lots of companies. Some of them have joined. Lily, I think, from PVG, which is one of the clients where we work at innovation cases at this moment. And the reason for organizing these webinars is that we're quite passionate about innovation. We like to share insights that we've developed over the years. And we've done that with our clients, with ups and downs, successes and mistakes, as you can likely expect in any innovation project. And as said, today we're going to discuss what it takes to become a best-in-class innovator. What we're going to cover today, first of all, what are the characteristics of innovative companies? And we will substantiate that with data insights from our Innovation Readiness database that holds close to 400 companies already. More about that later. We'll also discuss what steps you can take to, as an organization, to become a best-in-class innovator yourself. And today we will mainly talk about how you're going to make innovation happen rather than which innovations you should focus on. As in our previous webinars, we like to keep it interactive. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and we try to pick them up along the way. And we've also prepared some polls for you just to see where you stand on this topic.
Yeah, so also good morning from my side. As Marc just mentioned, we're going to do a rerun of some of the webinars and also include some of the new insights, obviously. But what hasn't changed is our conviction that any industry can and will be disrupted at some time. And Marc just talked about our research, and in our research we see that the majority of business leaders are sort of the same disposition that their businesses and industries can be disrupted. At the same time, that same research still shows that 45% of business leaders do not have sort of a good understanding of what will be the disruption that will get them, that will have impact on their business. And also at the same time, 54% of them doesn't have a well-defined innovation strategy, preparing themselves against that imminent disruption. And obviously, as we've seen over the past, I think it's already 2.5 years, we're dealing with this. A crisis like COVID-19 can really upset entire industries, and the same holds for, let's say, major supply chain disruptions. Although
the energy crisis we're currently facing,
exactly, energy crisis. Obviously the environmental crisis. So. Obviously, there's a lot on our radar that can disrupt our industries, and also we see that businesses don't sit still and they come up with these ultra competitive business models that they try to change complete industries with, for example, in the airline industry, or the music industry for that matter, where sort of we moved from buying our own records and CDs, and we've gone to sort of downloading and streaming media. So all of these ultra competitive business models have impact on businesses and industries. And then there is sort of the category of new breakthrough products and services, and in the picture here obviously depict Tesla, who's done major work in sort of disrupting the automobile industry, and sort of really leading and spearheading the electronic cars. And what we see is that innovation is the thing that sort of your fate depends on, right? So what we say is innovation separates the disruptors from the disrupted, and we feel that now it's more than ever it's crucial to focus on innovation, hence the topic of today's webinar.
And then, well, innovation often has something magical. People think you have to be like the genius inventor or that visionary like a Jobs or a Musk, or longer ago Henry Ford with his T model. But in our view, basically it's not really rocket science, provided, of course, you really understand the characteristics of best-in-class innovators. And if you're willing to adopt those innovation best practices in your organization. And what we see is that many companies today have sort of, come to that insight and are really investing in building up their innovation competencies. We'll give some examples later on from our own clients later on in this webinar. And that is exactly just to get that understanding is why we developed the Innovation Readiness Benchmark. We did so in 2018. It's an open online self-assessment. You can access it on our website to assess your own innovation power. And based on our own experience, innovation literature, we've identified 7 key areas that drive innovation power. We'll discuss them later on. And in total, those 7 areas cover 35 best practice areas. In addition to that, we have 12 drivers for disruption and also 5 criteria for innovation performance. And with that benchmark, you can sort of measure yourself against those best practices, but also compare yourself with the other companies in our database. And today we're more than 350. We're actually close to hitting the 400 mark. So
that's a new milestone.
New milestone, yeah, and it's really getting a lot of positive feedback, both from very large corporates to smaller startups and scale-ups. So that's also interesting now that the data is, the number is increasing. We can also make those kind of comparisons, and so we have a very interesting data set which we will share some of the key insights during this webinar. But maybe before we do so, just a quick poll for every one of you. We would like to sort of get your, where are you based on your gut feel, and you can sort of substantiate it later by joining our benchmark. But in terms of innovation power, are you a novice, enthusiast, are you ambitious, or do we have like best-in-class people available as well? If you're a consultant, we have some of them probably in this webinar as well. You can also answer this question for your current client or one of your most favorite clients.
A lot of ambitious people in the room,
and enthusiastic people. We have one best in class. That's good.
There's always one.
There's always one, and there should always be one. Maybe you can share some of your insights along the way in the chat.
Well, I know what's interesting about the Innovation Readiness Benchmark is that we feel that whenever people start to take the survey, it really is a good fire starter within the organization to start the discussion on where are we on innovation, how are we doing, as well as sort of hone your own sort of skills, do out the full picture of what it takes to be a best-in-class innovator. So especially for the ambitious and enthusiast innovators in our call,
which is most of the participants.
Which is most of you. It's really worthwhile to take the survey and just see which boxes you tick and which you don't. So great. So thank you for participating. So if we look at our work, sort of trying to get insight into the field of innovation is, I mentioned before that it's close to 2/3 of respondents to our survey rate their disruption risk as high. Also, obviously there's close to 50% of the people don't really understand where future innovations can disrupt their industries, and then at the same time another 51% doesn't invest sufficiently in projects with a long-term horizon. And then, if you couple that with, the 56% not having a well-defined innovation strategy, there's a lot of work to be done. And it, if you look at that, you could look at it, as a very troubling statistic. But also we feel that, there's hope.
You just said this morning to me, hope is poor strategy.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But, in the field of innovation and, the state of innovation, there's hope. And if you look, we've done some sort of correlation analysis on our database, and it suggests that there's a positive relationship between the participants' score on their innovation performance on the one hand, and their sort of average scoring on the 35 best practices on the other hand. So if you look at the sort of the scatter diagram, which is on the screen. This then suggests that if there's a positive relation between either being very good at innovation or adopting the 35 best practices, and the payoff that you see from innovation. Obviously, well, it's not a scientific research. It's still a self-assessment, but at least it's a very encouraging picture just to get this view out of the almost 400 companies in our database.
And I think the clear message is just when becoming a best-in-class innovator really requires you to take a look at those 35 best practices and see which one you should develop in particular. And that's different for every company. So we have companies who say, well, actually we're quite good in terms of how we are organized, and we do adopt the agile principles, but we do not have an innovation strategy. That's also sometimes the other way around. So there is an innovation strategy, but it sort of lacks in the execution. What you see here, I already mentioned earlier on that we have 7 key areas in our database, or basically in the framework behind the database. They're listed here on the screen, starting up with, having a good innovation strategy, being very customer centric. That's also, reaching out to customers. We've been working with Lily Young from PVG, and I think we did a great effort in reaching out to customers with new innovation ideas. And I think they really put a lot of effort in that.
It's also the fun part.
It's the fun part, and we got such good feedback, which we then used again to sort of hone those innovation ideas. You have to be also investing in your agility, the way you structure your innovation process, portfolio management. By the way, one of the key areas, we'll cover that later on, which is quite poorly developed in many companies. A lot of companies struggle with that. So a lot of good ideas, but they sort of keep on going. You need to organize innovation. You need to have the right skills and competencies, of course. And last but not least, it's really also about having the right culture and innovation leadership that you need to have in place. So I think those are the 7 key areas. And we cover some highlights, some of the key insights along the way in the remainder of this webinar.
And I think it's interesting to see, if you look at these sort of 7 best practice areas, there really are sort of two camps, if you will, of companies are either very structured but fail to deliver on innovation, and then there are companies that are really good in innovation but have no structures at all. So neither of them is really sustainable. So in the one situation, people get frustrated because all of the bells and whistles are in place, but they don't see any payoff. On the other hand, people really have to work very hard to get the most of that out of their innovation efforts. So really balancing sort of your score over these 7 best practices is key.
Well, let's start with innovation strategy. And as you can see, we've looked at the data, and that there are 5 best practices under innovation strategy. We picked out 2 of them. And what we see is that strong performance, that rate quite high on the 5 criteria for innovation performance, really score higher on having a well-defined innovation strategy. 3.8 on a 5-point scale, by the way. That's all these numbers are on a 5-point scale versus 2.5, a mere 2.5 for the weak performance. And also the investment in long-term projects. That's really where the strong performers rate significantly higher than the weak performance. And I think that's always when companies are really focused on short-term results, that's where they go wrong, because then they really only think about how does it sell more products instead of how can we make sure that we remain relevant longer term. And that requires you to invest not only in sort of the incremental innovations, but also in the more Horizon 2 and 3. I think a very nice example, we've been working together with the Power and Equipment division of POM. I think everybody knows POM more from the Volkswagen, but they're also the main distributor for Caterpillar in several countries. There's a lot happening there, both in the power side of their business as well as in the equipment side. Think about digitalization of the customer journey, but also more autonomous equipment. Really interesting topics over there. Sustainability is a big issue, and they've really embarked on a sort of mission to become more innovative. They are now working on their innovation strategy, both at the division as well as on the OpCo level. They have an internal innovation department, Area 52. Very enthusiastic team. Yeah, it's really great work. It's a nice name as well. And they play a key role in driving the strategy development, supporting the OpCos, but also professionalizing the innovation process. And as a part of the innovation strategy development, we're also now filling sort of on the go their innovation funnel with not only incremental Horizon 1 project, but also the more big bets, if you like, more disruptive Horizon 2 and 3. And they won't have like 15 projects in the Horizon 3, but at least they're sort of committing themselves to have a number of them to really stay ahead of their competition. By the way, in our next webinar, we'll focus more on what it takes to develop a solid innovation strategy. So that link will be made available later on. On doing so, one of the frameworks we adopt a lot is it's basically a sort of our own version of the 10 types of innovation, if you like, which is the growth tactics, the 3x3 growth tactics framework. And we see that many companies, they focus innovation primarily on products, which is logical. If you're kind of in the hardware, you're an OEM, then products is of course key. But what we feel is that truly distinctive innovations, they relate to more different types of growth tactics. And a good example is the bicycle industry. We've been working several years with Axel Group. You may not know the name, but it's the holding above Batave, Sparta, and some international brands. And that was really to shape their strategic innovation. They were, by the way, the first and trendsetter with traditional e-bikes. I think we all know the Sparta Met, maybe the older ones here, but that was like the Sparta that really introduced the e-bike concept, but also later on in electric MTBs, mountain bikes. And there was a segment that was actually invented by the brand Highbike. But what you saw is that new entrants like Stella, Canyon, Decathlon, they innovated not only their products, but also other areas of the business model, like distribution channels, customer engagement, service. And, then you have many bike sharing plans, which we see a lot, by the way, these days, also in the Netherlands, which introduce fundamentally different business models around using bicycles instead of owning them. And that meant that product innovation, one of the strongholds of Excel, was not, alone was no longer sufficient. And together with them, we developed like a blueprint, if you like, for the future strategy and also the innovations that needed to take place. And today they have experience centers, hybrid distribution models, private online platform, participation in ventures, but also sort of redesigned their whole supply chain, which is typically an Achilles heel of this sector. Which kind of goes to show that, you have to be really good at product innovation in some industries because the product is still what consumers buy. But if you don't focus on the other areas as well, you're easily sort of bypassed, if you like, by some of your competitors. So this is a framework that helps you to think broader than just on the product side.
Yeah, and I think it clearly advocates sort of widening the scope of your innovation efforts.
Yeah.
So again, so as we mentioned before, there's a lot of companies that must develop their innovation strategies. So obviously, most companies have a corporate or a growth strategy, but then the innovation strategy is lacking, and that's why we at RevelX we developed the Innovation Strategy Canvas, which is a very like handy tool. It sort of resembles the business model canvas, but is really geared towards innovation and what role innovation plays within your organization. And as Marc said, we have a full webinar coming up on innovation strategy. I think we can make the download available for people within the webinar on the Innovation Strategy Canvas. But we also published recently, in addition to our corporate innovation playbook, we also introduced this strategy playbook or innovation strategy playbook, which is also available. And Rob has made it available for you to download now. And so within the innovation strategy playbook, we describe all of those tactics and approaches that you can take as a business towards winning with innovation. So use those tools to your advantage. So if we move on to the second area of our third or 7 best practices, best practice areas, it's we talk about innovation portfolio, and as Marc pointed out, this is something that is across the board quite weakly developed. So if we look at the data, most respondents say that they score relatively low, and you also see this back in these data points. And so 65% of innovation projects aren't based on solid business cases, and another 2/3 aren't held against any strict performance management,
which is basically
targets.
a strategy of hope, Matthijs. We just
exactly.
hope it delivers something, but we just don't know.
Exactly.
And to your point.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we have to recognize that it's not always easy. So, within your innovation strategy, obviously, you start defining what innovation means to the organization, but then you also have to manage all of those projects that come with that. And and I think one of the experiences that we have working with companies on innovation portfolio management with BDR Thermia, which is I think the top 3 brand worldwide in heating and climate solutions.
Not the brand actually. It's
the
we
group,
all know
actually.
them. We know them of Remea, which is their brand, but the group is leading.
Thanks for pointing that out. But one of the problems that they encountered is that many of their innovation projects just took way too long to materialize, and that one, and they suffer what we call sort of the peanut butter syndrome, which is basically if you spread it too thin, nothing really happens. Very close cooperation with the BDR team. We scrutinized their innovation portfolio, and we even sort of entered into a kill mode. So we actually had this project, which was called the Project Kill, which was really aimed to clean up the portfolio and remove all of those unsuccessful projects, which were then cluttering the innovation performance of BDR Thermia, and you can imagine that that's quite a difficult task to carry out, since there's over 400 people I think involved in all of those projects, and you have to kill some darlings. But it really takes that sort of scrutiny to really get a successful innovation portfolio in place. And the other, we also have experience with the other side of the spectrum when we work with the academic hospital in Nijmegen, in the Netherlands, Radboud UMC, is that with them we concluded that their portfolio included way too little projects to be successful and to have full focus on innovation. So we really applied our innovation portfolio best practices on their innovation business to really sort of drive that funnel. Why bother? You could think that maybe portfolio management is another administrative task in your organization. There obviously is an element to it, But if you look at the statistics again of our innovation readiness research, is that you see 3% of the low innovation performers actually has portfolio management in place, whereas 16% of the average performers has the same in place, and then 51% of the high performers is really good at innovation portfolio management. So you really see the difference between 3 versus 51. It can make the difference between being a good and a low performer.
It's kind of a paradox, isn't it, Matthijs? Because on the one hand, innovation is about letting 1,000 flowers blossom, and on the other hand, you have to be very strict and say no to like 1,000 things. So
in essence, innovation really is a core business process, and you should look at it that way. You should manage it that way, and that requires obviously the administrative or the strict task of managing that process. So we have another poll lined up. So we're curious to learn from you, given the fact that portfolio management has such a big impact on innovation performance, is how well do you guys manage your innovation portfolio? So do you don't actively manage it? Or is it not good enough? Are you rather good? Or are you professionals in this area? And obviously, in the last case, we'd like to speak to you and learn what you do well. So let's hear it from you. Okay.
Well, a lot of answers here. Some people are coming now. Maybe some people need to think, how honest am I going to be? But it will remain anonymous, so don't be afraid.
Absolutely. This is not something to cast a judgment, but I think it's just looking at these answers, it sort of resembles what we find in practice, is that the majority of people are just not good enough or not strict enough in the way they manage their innovation portfolio.
And again, this is we said earlier on, becoming the best in class innovator is not rocket science. This is typically something where you can sort of easily, if you have the right tools, and do check out our webinar on portfolio management, you can make simple improvements by just applying some of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, as you said, it's similar to our data.
I think two things could be interesting for you guys to. We don't have it as downloads in the webinar, but we have it on our website. One is a checklist of how to scrutinize your innovation portfolio, and the other one is a framework for structuring your innovation portfolio. So do go to our website, go to the warehouse section, and download those two templates. So because they're really worth your while.
Well, which brings us to the third area in our benchmark. We had 7. This is the third one, and that's improving your organizational agility. Typically a buzzword in recent years when it comes to innovation. And well, there's kind of good news. Half of the participants in our benchmark indicate that they have already adopted the agile principles in their innovation projects. I think that's good. I recently came across let's say a large transportation company where they said, well, actually sort of have 2 almost like streams within the company, where one was really focusing on the traditional Watergate type, stage gate, waterfall type of approach, and the other ones were more working according to agile. And I was like, how can we sort of bring those 2 worlds together? And I think that's typically what you should do, because it's not one is better than the other. I think you should benefit from both. Looking at some of these statistics, what we see is that, good news is that most of the companies, at least the majority of the companies, have already understood that you need to build multidisciplinary teams around innovation. Close to 50% has already adopted the agile principles, and also close to 50% uses rapid prototyping and experimentation in that. And prototyping can be as simple as making a customer presentation, going out to your customer and ask them for feedback. So it can take many shapes and forms. And when you start doing that, and this is way too much to cover in this webinar. Actually, we did a
full webinar on it.
We did it. No, not only a full webinar, an entire series on that. So the series of 2021.
Yes.
We started off with introducing the 3 innovation challenges, which you see on the top, which is the ideation challenge, the validation challenge, and then the scale-up channels, and how that relates to the 4 core innovation methodologies, which you see below them. And those, it's impossible to discuss them in depth, but in essence, design thinking is the in essence that every innovation process must start with having a good insight in what your future challenges of your customers are and how your innovation can address it. Lean startup adds to that the critical hypotheses and that need to be validated via MVPs as soon as possible, so minimal viable products. And these MVPs you really need to develop in an agile way, which is based on short sprints with multidisciplinary teams, learning from each sprint. And the go-to-market is basically about methodological marketing to gain tractions for your innovation quickly. And those core methodologies are again explained in the 21 webinar series. Yep. And by the way, also in the first playbook that we launched, which is our corporate innovation playbook. Don't think we have it as a download today, Rob, via the webinar, but it's also in our growth warehouse on our website. So do check it out.
That's actually, this is one of the, I think it's been downloaded already over 3,000 times. So it's probably worth, there you go. There you go.
Magical. Thank you, Rob, for making it available.
We should give him more credit.
Which we just did.
So thanks, Rob, for making that available. And actually, the playbook is something that we use as a basis for working with a lot of companies and making innovation work within their companies. I should say that we're not let's say very dogmatic about the application of innovation methods like lean startup and design thinking, but we always make it applicable to a business. And at the moment, we're working with our friends at KLM on building a technology innovation lab based on those principles. And it's really about creating a more sustainable airline, a more efficient airline with the use of technology. So really, the playbook is really grounded in in practice, and we use it a lot to work with our clients on building innovation.
And I think it also relates to how mature the business is. So in some companies we see that they are sort of well developed in many areas, and you can sort of introduce more sophisticated tooling. And for some other companies who are really at the start of their journey, we just take sort of the key concepts from the playbook and tailor that to their own specific situation. So it's not really about kind of a one-size-fits-all.
Not at all. No, not at all.
But the playbook is sort of the starting point for that.
It's more of a guide than okay. So we just talked about innovation being a core process within your organization, and what we see is that from our research is that only 1/3 of the people within the organization are trained or well trained in innovation thinking and tooling, which makes you think. If you compare it to other areas of the business like finance and operations and stuff like that, there really is a lot of work to be done here. And for example, we work with a company called SPIE, which is a large leading installation company in Europe with I think 7 to 8 billion euros of turnover. And they quickly realized that they don't have innovation as a key process and a category of skills and capability within their business. So we work with them with I think the program is called Ambition Manager. So it's the program really was geared toward having people who are sort of on their way up in the organization to provide them with the skills and capabilities or competences to really manage the innovation process well. And we build a innovation toolkit for them and an internal network of innovation professionals. So that really is something that was key, and we think that should get more attention within companies to really treat innovation process as a core capability
and not
of the organization,
and not let it be the sole responsibility of if you have it like your one innovation manager or your tiny innovation department. I think this is really something that needs to be sort of in the DNA of more people.
Exactly.
That's also about building a network, which is actually what the Area 52 team at PON is currently doing, by building kind of circles of innovation professionals who then are sort of aware of what it takes to run innovation projects.
And actually, and again, I agree, and that's exactly also what we're doing at KLM is building these technology innovation labs throughout the business, such it doesn't sit, within one department, because that really for innovation is not the right place to be, but really sort of distribute it and democratize that innovation function. So I think we have another poll coming up, and just to get a little bit more personal within this webinar, we think it's important to have people with, in the analogy of Lean Six Sigma, have innovation black belts within your organization. So this is maybe a bit of a personal question, but how would you rate yourself as an innovation professional? Are you a black belt already? Are you getting there? Do you need to start training? Let's hear it from you. Okay. So we've got one black belt, so that's interesting. A lot of people are on a journey, and some are.
Which is probably why you're here. But
let's face it. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, maybe the people who were rated absolutely happy to get your feedback on this webinar and some of the other stuff. And we can always learn from that.
Yeah, maybe we also have vacancies. So if there are some true black belts in,
you can always apply. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's true, Matthijs. Okay, moving on, and one of the I think I mentioned in the beginning. Last but not least, we have culture and leadership. And what we see looking at our data, the personal involvement of leaders in innovation projects, so the degree to which they are, and which doesn't mean, you have to manage it, but it's about active sponsorship. It's about showing commitment. It's also about making resources available. That is the number one differentiator between the strong and the weak performance. So if you look at strong and weak performance, this is where the difference is the largest. Quite interesting, and also something that you as an organization need to take into account. And no, you really don't have to be like a Steve Jobs or that kind of person. As I said, it's really about creating focus, to give room to people to work in innovation and to consistently invest in it. And that may, of course, be difficult in kind of your day-to-day reality, also with pressure on the short-term results. But I think that's really where leadership commitment is key, and you need to make that happen. And Lily, I mentioned you before, but I think this is exactly what's happening, at a company like PVG, where there is an understanding. Okay, we are in a sort of fossil-based appliances, so we really need to do something because things are changing in our world, and therefore we need to invest. And that's a long-term commitment that you need to make.
Many times, when we talk to organizations and innovators within organizations, we ask that question: how is your management team committed to innovation? And oftentimes we tell people that if you want to get something in place, get that in place first, because really getting top management involvement, commitment, and drive is crucial, if not conditional, to innovation success.
And then it also comes to I work for another company which is they're in the access control business, part of a large installation company, and their managing director, I think he's all of this together, by the way, but he's basically sort of ignoring a lot of the corporate rules, and he's just, there you get just the projects we just do. He just invests in it because he really believes it needs to be done. And they're actually the leading access control company in the Netherlands for large corporates. They've introduced SaaS platforms, software as a service platforms, really differentiating them from competitors. But it has been a long journey. I think it took them 5 to 6 years to get to this point. And I think if he just would have followed the corporate rules and bureaucracy, it would have never have happened. Which I think brings us to the last main topic. We also have the dare part coming up, which relates to this one, but it's about creating diversity. And I think we always sort of kind of jokingly say you need to have 3 sort of stereotypes within your organization or within your innovation team. You need to have the hipsters, The guys with the creative ideas who can really challenge the status quo, even within the larger corporates. And they don't have to look like this guy, but it's really about sort of the attitude and the mindset. And Matthijs will discuss mindset later on. You need to have the hackers, of course, who are, who can make it happen and who are also willing to draw a bit outside the lines, maybe not always use the corporate IT platform, but do it slightly different. And then you also cannot do without the hustlers, those handy, slick figures who create close creative deals, can seduce, and know how to win over a customer. And you basically have to have all of them in your team. And again, not really about, they have to look like this, but it's really about mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's about mindset and innovation. Like organizations they consist of individuals and individual people, and I think about 2.5 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, we started thinking about, so what is the mindset that innovators successful innovators in an organization sort of embody, and we came up with this acronym called DARE, which stands for Defiance, Adventure, Realism, and Endurance. And defiance, it's about going against the grain. It's about being able to sort of go against the established order, which you just described about the CEO of that access control company, really seeing the opportunities. But it's also about and then the A for adventure is about, okay, so how, when I'm exploring all of these new opportunities, am I really willing and able to run some risks and take some and actually engage in experiments to really find out what the value of an innovation opportunity is. And then thirdly, you need the realists within an organization who can actually tell you, and they're probably the people also are sort of ranking high in portfolio management, is okay, so how is this going to make us money? Are we is this really part of where we want to be as an organization? So they really have to apply this sort of sense of realism onto your innovation process. And then there's the fourth sort of mindset category, which we call endurance, which is really is embodied by the people who can go on the long grind, who can really do that, what we call the diligent execution of projects, running those programs, which are sometimes, I would say sometimes, mostly not easy to pull off because you're trying to sort of change the way the business is made up or operates. So it's really those four mindset elements that you need within your organization. And as obviously as a shameless plug within this webinar, I co-authored
buy the book.
Yeah, exactly, buy the book. I co-authored the book Dare together with Eric de Groot in our company, in which we describe that Dare mindset in quite elaborate detail. The book, you can order it off, you can send us an email, but also order it through the website if you're interested. But it's it really you really have to become aware of you need all of these mindset within your organization, but also within your innovation
and
teams.
If you take Ensecure, the access control company, I think the CEO or the managing director, he's really about the D and the A.
Yeah.
He defies everything. It's amazing almost. He's a big adventurist, but he's not necessarily always on the realism. So sometimes he's just ahead of the peloton, as I would say in cycling terms. But then he has a team around him who actually ask those questions. Sure. and has the stamina to make it happen. And he's already off to the next adventure.
That's true, and again we have we see a clustering of DA people and RE people in organizations, and so just bring those two worlds together, and that will drive success. And actually, within the book, we also describe we also have a list of rarely asked questions. So if you're a C-level executive or somewhere in the board or management of an organization, just check out those lists of rarely asked questions, because obviously we're used to asking the same questions over and over again with an organization. For example, how many products are we going to sell? But how can you challenge your innovation teams by asking different questions? Have a look at that. Okay, so I think we're sort of nearing the end of our webinar. I also want to sort of maybe put your minds at ease a little bit that becoming a best-in-class innovator is not an overnight journey. Is really something that takes time, and it's something that you really have to get right. But at the same time, speed is of the essence, and this is one of my favorite quotes from
which I hope you do not apply on our highways, Matthijs.
Exactly, from I think one of my media heroes, Jeremy Clarkson, where he says, "Speed has never killed anyone, but suddenly becoming stationary, that's what gets you." And I think if you look at organization, that's the same thing. So and it's about moving forward and engaging in forward motion, rather than staying still or even worse, reversing. And try doing that on the highway, and it'll get you in an interesting situation. So it's not an easy job, but it's something that you have to take on, diligently and with urgency.
Yeah. And then, one way to start it, and I think you already guessed it, but in all honesty, that's how it's used a lot, the benchmark. The companies say, I just want to get a better insight on where I need to develop, because we have those 7 areas. We covered some of them, and not even all the 35 best practices. But you can't do everything at once. And as I said earlier, in some cases, it makes sense to start with your innovation strategy. But in other cases, you'd rather start with building leadership or start investing in the competencies, so that kind of depends on where you are in terms of maturity, but also what has been developed and whatnot. And the benchmark, you can access it on the website. I think Rob will make available a pop-up to the landing page. By the way, if you click on that, it opens in your browser. You can also go to our website and find it over there. Yeah. My advice would be to fill it after the webinar. It takes you about 8 minutes. You will get a personal report. You see some examples on the screen on the sheet here, which also compares your score with the other companies in our database. And if you want to do more of a deep dive, and that's also has become quite popular. Initially, we need to have a full company assessment. Well, that doesn't really make sense, but we found out that when you have like a management team or a board of directors or an innovation team, like 7 to 8 people typically, it really is very insightful to make the assessment as a team. We did so, by the way, for example, for the Royal Dutch Air Force. We presented it back to 9 Air Force generals, which was quite an interesting discussion, because then you see the differences between those guys. And again, I said, this is typically what we do a lot for companies who are at the beginning of the journey and want to build sort of a shared understanding of where they need to start, where to start our journey, on becoming a best-in-class innovator.
And I think, as I said before, it really is a good fire starter for you if you're an innovation manager or in charge of innovation or tasked with the process of innovation within your organization. To really have that sort of widespread discussion with or wide-ranging discussion with your organization on how are we doing in innovation, where are we, and what do we need to develop. Okay, so then we have another set of helpful tools. I think we talked about the innovation playbooks already and made them available for download. And then we have what we call the on-demand webinars, or the webinars that we've sort of broadcast before, and you can watch reruns of those on our websites. And as Marc said, we have some in-depth webinars on the ideation, validation, and scale-up challenges within the organization in the innovation process, but also innovation strategy, portfolio management, the organization of innovation within your organization, and then creating a culture of innovation. So those are a number of webinars that we have available. And then we have our next webinar, which is coming up already in 4 weeks. It's exactly 4 weeks on September 29th, in which we will talk about innovation strategy. And we'll do a deep dive into the role of innovation within your company strategy, organization strategy, and how you can define your own specific innovation strategy. We talked about it before. You can use the innovation strategy canvas and also the innovation strategy playbook, which was available for download, takes key stage in that webinar. But we'll share a lot more best practices. We'll share a lot more, real life cases like we've done today. Really talk to you about, how innovation strategy can come to life within an organization. So you can sign up on the poll, or we'll surely send you an email to remind you to come up. And with that, I think it's time for a Q&A. Let's see if there are any more questions from you in the audience. Use the chat function, please, to send us your questions.
And maybe Rob, you can, if you like, stop the presentation because we're I think done with the presentation part, and happy to take some of your questions if there are any. And you can always, of course, reach out to us one-on-one after this webinar.
And actually, just maybe while people are typing, I'm not sure if they are, but we are always open for a 30-minute free consultation if you want to. So just hook us up, and then we can answer any questions that you might have.
We have one question from Mario. As a trailblazer and catalyst, how can I explain my moonshots to the global entity? Read my colleagues. Any advice? Any advice? I have no idea what type of organization you are in, Mario, but it's obviously innovation thrives by results. Obviously, so we're so getting some really quick results and boasting your stories about your results is a really good strategy. But it's but explaining the moonshots is. We have not to plug this too much, but we have another sort of format which we call the disruptor, and making people part of the moonshots is a very powerful way of sort of making them sort of experience what you want to do as an organization in terms of innovation. So rather than sort of broadcasting your views on what kind of moonshots you might have for innovation, is just make them part of the dialogue by just engaging with them in an interesting way. And if you want to have more information about that, just reach out. Which by the way starts, if I may add, Matthijs, with thinking about the disruption that can hit your company. And I think because the reason why you're doing these moonshots, I presume, Mario, is because that you feel that something fundamentally needs to change for your business in order to stay relevant longer term. And I think what you quite often see is that companies get complacent, don't see the external threats, and I think if you either think about that yourself and add that to your the way you present your moonshot, or involve people in having that external look and thinking about the challenges but also the opportunities that those developments can bring, then the moonshot gets sort of embedded in or at least has a context within a shared view on what's going to happen in your industry. And joining the Breakfast Innovation Club, reach out to us later on.
I'm really curious to learn what it is.
We're always in for a free breakfast, but maybe it's something different. So
I know the movie Breakfast Club. But,
happy to hear about that, Mario, and I think we'll be in touch. Any other questions? And if not, we just log off, and we have a couple of minutes left before our next meeting to get a coffee, which is fine as well.
I guess we're signing off.
I think so. Yeah, I think we are, Matthijs. Let's before we do that, thanks to everybody for joining us. Happy to host you. Hope to see you back again in our next webinar.
Yeah. Again, and also thanks Rob, because we didn't tell you at the beginning, but Rob is he got the COVID, so he's at home and supporting us, remote. So Rob, get well soon. And guys, Corona is still out there, so be safe. Yeah. And we'll hope to see you in our next webinar on the 29th.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.